So we're excited to welcome our latest guest, Tracie Sponenberg, to Rebels of the Heart. Welcome.
Hey, Derek. Good to see you again.
It's
This
nice
time
to meet
virtually.
you. Yes, this time virtually. Last time we got together was in person in New Hampshire. That was quite a fun
Oh,
venue that we got to
it
hang out.
was.
Yeah,
It
it's a
was
great,
really cool.
great event. And I've been looking forward to this conversation because I know that you are very much a rebel spirit. And in fact, before we had met in person, I'd seen your content talking about your rebel community of leaders and HR leaders and practitioners over the last couple of years. And I'm like, well, we have to be meeting here because the overlap in our work is so evident, right? So why don't we
Absolutely. I
just
love it.
start there? How did the community, your rebellious community, come into existence? Where did that form for you?
So, gosh, years ago, probably more than 10 years ago now, I met a woman named Michelle Strasburger, and she had all of this knowledge around data and analytics that I was really trying to learn more about in my time in my last job. And I remembered that. And so when I left my last job, I reached out to her because I thought she'd be a natural fit. And she was, and she took over my job. We became great friends. I took over teaching for her. And we would talk really regularly. It was part of my exit package with my CEO. And then we just kept doing it and found we had a lot in common. And one of the things we had in common was we really thought of HR in a more modern way. And I think if you're talking to somebody in a newer company, a tech company, that's second nature, but that's not the way it is in New Hampshire. It's still not the way it is. Some people, sure, but HR was still practiced like it was practiced when it was personnel in a lot of places. And so we thought differently. So we couldn't find the support in our local HR community that we really wanted to kind of advance the profession and to advance our own knowledge and to really, look toward the future of work. And so we created our own group and we called ourselves the HR Rebels. It was a lunch group that met once a month locally. And then the pandemic hit. And then we started meeting virtually and helping each other out through that just overwhelming time. And then with all of the social unrest in 2020, we realized we looked around, we were a bunch of white ladies in our 40s and beyond. And so we said, that's kind of not really an inclusive community. So we put out a call on LinkedIn and opened it up. And now it's a diverse group of, I think, almost 1,000 people from all over the world. And people join in whenever they can, once a week on Zoom, and support each other outside. And there have been friendships and in-person meetings and jobs that have happened and business deals, and it's really fun to see.
It's awesome. And I'm curious, what kind of topics when you meet weekly are coming up? What are you talking about in this group of rebels at the moment?
So it started out as a lot of DEI focused topics. So we had
Right.
like Future Kane, who I absolutely adore, and I need to speak with again. It's been too long. Who she did a guest spot with us, and we had different guest speakers talking about really tough issues. So we tried to tackle the things that historically as HR we want to kind of put aside,
Yeah.
and we still do that certainly, but we source the members, like, what do you want to talk about? So it's been things like we certainly talked about hybrid work, and we've talked about you know should DEI report to HR or to the CEO? And we've talked about, I'm trying to think of other topics, but you name it. So anything that's being talked about in the world of work, there's a topic of the week most weeks, and whoever wants to join in that particular week joins in.
Yeah.
And there are two rules. You just have to be people first, and you can't be an asshole. And hopefully I can say that, or maybe I'll bleep it if you're not. So
You're
those are
good.
the only two guidelines.
You're good. I like it. And I'm curious, that one question, should DEI report to HR or to the CEO?
So I think that's a great question. And I think we're still a small enough company where we don't have a DEI department at my department. And I think in my company, what I've seen it all over the place. I think in general, if the company takes DEI from a company perspective super seriously, I think reporting to the CEO makes sense because you're going beyond HR. You're going into marketing, you're going into sales, you're going into development, R&D. So that makes a lot of sense. I think what the most important thing is, though, is that you move forward as an organization
Yeah.
whoever you had responsible for DEI, whatever is happening, that you move forward to becoming an organization of belonging.
Yeah. Well said. I'm curious. So for you, where did your story of, being a rebel with a heart as a person, not as necessarily an HR leader, but kind of where has that showed up for you in your life?
Yeah, I don't know if it's shown up yet, actually. So I think I'm still working on that. I think I was really firmly kind of a traditional HR practitioner.
Absolutely.
And, I grew up that way. Like, here's your form, sign this. And this is what the company says to do. So I'm going to do it. And doing things that I was told and not questioning it. And then maybe about 10 years ago, I started to evolve that a little bit. And I work on that every single day. And I'm still working on that. Um, and I don't think of myself, aside from the tattoos, which shouldn't be rebellious. I don't think of myself as particularly rebellious, but certainly I rebel against the notion of HR being the compliance police
Yeah.
and um, existing for the company. HR exists for our people.
Sure. Completely agree with that statement. So I'm curious what shifted 10 years ago that you started to question your habits or your beliefs or your ways of doing things up to that point that you are now with intention trying things differently.
So I didn't think of it at the time, but it was really I was developing a growth mindset. I was firmly kind of in a fixed mindset, and I sort of was at a point where I looked around at my life and wasn't particularly happy with myself and how I was living and what I was doing and how I was treating people. And now you ask anybody from my life at that time, probably would not have noticed it. This was very
Really?
much an
Wow.
internal shift for me. People would say I was kind, but I just started to question everything I was doing, and I got healthy and I lost weight and I started developing better habits, and I started looking and going, I don't have to be living this way. Like, I don't have to
Yeah.
be existing, just doing everything that I was told, right? I don't
Yeah.
have to be. Part of that came from, I worked for a professional services firm, and it
Yeah.
was very much do as you're told, or else. And part of that came from making that shift to a company where I really learned what good, solid, strategic HR was about. I had an
Yeah.
incredible CEO who was a real coach for me. His name was Andy Greenewald, and he was just really helped me see my potential when I couldn't see it myself.
Yeah.
My husband as well. We used to work together, and he would champion me and kind of say, you can do this, and no, I can't. No, you can do this, and so it was other people sort of pushing me, and then I had to kind of make that transformation myself. And then once I did, I just kind of kept going and learning and growing and meeting people. And I'm a really deep introvert. Even now, I'm like beat
Mm.
red talking to you, and I just tried to kind of change my life for the better, and it's been so worth it.
It's beautiful. Was there a moment or an experience or was there something that catalyzed that for you? Like,
There were a few things. I think one that sticks out in my mind was I had a woman who was on my team at my last company, and she, I wasn't really good about giving feedback. And I think that's still something I work on. And I just figured she's doing her job, well. I didn't say anything that, I didn't tell her she wasn't doing anything wrong.
yeah,
So, I just kept going. And one day she's like, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure." And she comes in, and I cannot imagine the courage it took her to do this.
mm,
She shut the door and she's like, "I have a problem." I'm like, "Oh no." She's like, "It's you." I went, "Oh no." Well, I'm the type of person who horrified by that. And I said, "Well, what's going on?" She's like, "You never give me any feedback. I never know where I stand. I never know how I'm doing." And it was a huge shift for me in my personal and professional life going, I was so inwardly focused that I really wasn't focusing on the needs of my team. And I just completely looked at everything I did. And I'm still working on it every day, but I looked at everything I did, and she did me one of the biggest favors of my life by giving me that really difficult feedback.
and is that practiced or how do you when you think about daily, is there a method that you've been using to help refine and tune into that?
Not really. I try to consume a lot of content, whether that's books or whether that's, LinkedIn is great, Twitter's great, or articles. And um, I don't practice daily intentions. I know that works for a lot of people. I don't meditate. I know that works for a lot of people. I just try to kind of be a good human. And I take a lot of the things that I've read and learned about and just kind of have my own practice and know that there are things that I'm good at and things that I'm not. I know that I'm better when I have a smaller team reporting directly to me, and that the larger team can funnel. I can work through a few people and funnel things better.
Yeah.
I learned my strengths and I learned what I'm um, not so great at.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so open and sharing these experiences, by the
Yeah.
way. So especially knowing you're introvert, which I never would have imagined in a million years from our time knowing each other. Um, Howard, so back kind of bringing it, we're going back and forth, going back to the business lens and back to HR and back to the work that you do daily. Like, how do you see now as a result of the last couple of years and the work that you're doing in yourself and, this community that you've formed and the ideas that you're integrating? How do you see HR's role really changing over the next decade? I mean, things are really in a fascinating place from my perspective. What do you see, right, in that word? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of work to be done in the wider world to catch up to even
Yeah.
2023, right? And I don't love to like forecast the future because who the heck would have predicted a pandemic?
Yeah.
But I hope that we continue on this, trajectory where we're seen as business leaders, that HR leaders are seen as business leaders. I had a conversation the other day with the CEO of an 1,800 person company, more in the traditional space.
Yeah.
Um, and he didn't have a CHRO. And I pushed back, like, hey, and I just have these conversations for fun. I because I love advancing the profession. And
Yeah.
he didn't have a CHRO. I said, "Do you have a CFO?" He said, "Yes." I said, and I have this conversation a lot. If you have a CEO, if you have a CFO, you should have a CHRO.
Yeah.
You have no idea what a business leader who specializes in people can do for your organization. And I think that's and he was great and he's totally coming around and waking up. He's like, I wish I knew all of this 10 years ago because a lot of people have that experience of HR's benefits and compliance and paperwork and any of the other crap that you can't throw on anybody else, and particularly in smaller companies.
Yeah.
But it's really a department that can transform your organization. So I hope that we keep going that way. I think we'll see a lot more things like data scientists and in HR. We'll see a lot more people focusing on the psychology of people. Lori Rudiman talked about this in her book and talks about both of those things being true, to HR being filled with data scientists and psychologists. And I think that we're going to
Yeah.
see a lot more of that because we're getting into the well-being of our people in
Yes.
ways that we hadn't in the past. And I think we'll continue on that trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the amount of employment opportunities and new roles that can be created or will be created through these last couple of years and changes of what's been shown and personalizing the experience of benefits,
Hmm.
personalizing different cultural needs, and
Yep.
making investments different ways. Like I think that to do that well is going to require a massive expansion of the area of this and how that contributes to the business as well. And measuring that and experimenting with that and um, I think you're exactly right. So I think we're in a really interesting time where, what marketing was, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, we're
Right.
seeing that kind of renaissance, if you will, of HR, right? I mean, and that's even a question
Super
like,
exciting.
yeah, is HR even the right title? Is HR even the right naming for what this is going to become? I don't think it is personally, but
No.
it's what we are today. I mean, do you have an idea of what it might become? Have you thought about that at all?
I don't care what it's called as long as
Yeah.
I do care. I care it's not called human capital. It's just
Yeah.
an icky term. But I don't care what it's called as long as the art and the science of HR are woven in together. So we HR is very much an art and a science, and we traditionally been really good at the art part of things, and the science part is newer. Again, a lot of people out there doing really great things, but on the whole, there's a lot of evolution that has to happen there. But we changed our team to the people team a few years
Yeah.
ago. We just felt like that was better suited to us. And I had that conversation today. I still get people asking, "What is that?" And I love that actually because it sparks conversation. We did an acquisition a few years ago. like, your title is chief people officer. I love it, but I don't know what it means. So it's fun to have that conversation with people and explain what the department does. And our department really went from when I first started 7.5 years ago to doing those things like the processing of benefits. It was very administrative. We transformed, we brought in technology, overhauled everything. We've done a couple of little iterations since then, and we're getting ready to kind of blow everything up again and change it to wrap around our team's purpose of building an incredible individual people experience. And you touched on that, Derek, like that individual part
Yeah.
is so super important that we can't create, here's your box, stick
Yes.
in it, you person X and person Y, here's your box. We have to create these programs that
Yeah.
people can kind of self-select into depending on where their interests lie and their career goals lie.
Yeah. So to that point, I'm kind of getting kind of more practical. How are you seeing leaders, CEOs, CFOs, the more traditional business process, if you want to call it, not more traditional, but they have an established way of doing business, right? You're now advising them on evolving that. How are you seeing that being received? And how is that changing the way that you're doing business, if you will?
Yeah, I think, I my full-time job at the Granite Group and my CEO is amazing. So we very much have a collaboration, and sometimes he'll be like, "Well, yeah, that's not going to work." And so we're like, "All right, you're the CEO." And sometimes he's like, "Didn't think of that." And great. And I
Right.
challenge him, and we have it took a long time to develop, but we
Yeah.
have a really good relationship. And when I get the occasion to do a speaking event, or when somebody gives, like in this case of the person I referenced, the CEO, my name, like, this is, you need to know what good modern HR looks like. I take that opportunity to talk, and I'm finding now CEOs being receptive. For the most part, I'm finding, I'm, this is just totally anecdotal, but I'm finding that sometimes CEOs are having a hard time knowing where to go to get the information, particularly in more traditional spaces. Um, but that they're really receptive to talking about, what their organization could look like with a modern HR department.
I think that's phenomenal news and needed. And I think it's going to continue to evolve. And I'm glad that you and people like you are doing this work. So, Tracie, how can our audience connect with you, learn more about you, learn about your community? Just let us know how we find you.
Yeah, I think I'm the only Tracie Sponenberg on LinkedIn, so it's pretty easy to find me there. And I'm at Tracie with an IE, Tracie Spon on Twitter and Instagram and Peloton and Clubhouse, which I'm not on anymore, but I used to remember Clubhouse, and wherever else I keep that. So I'd love to connect with new people, particularly new people passionate about changing HR for the better.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your heart, your rebellious spirit. I like to see how it continues to evolve, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dirk.